This is Scott Roadheaver, a good friend of mine. He's from Forsyth, Georgia. And generationally, he's been a Southerner, but we found a few kind of interesting surprises in his family tree just going back a few generations. So, so the first thing I asked him was his grandfather's name, because you have to go with people that are deceased. It always works out better. He really didn't know that much about his grandfather. He knew his grandfather's name and his grandmother's name. And I ended up tracing his ancestry through his father's brother. Now, as it turned out, the grandfather's brother's obituary gave a few names that led me down the track to the next ancestor up, which was his great grandfather. And it turned out that just within that generation, Scott's family, who has been generationally Southern, was from up north. So in Scott's case, I went through the uncle. The uncle's name was Patrick. He was born in Maryland in 1927, as well as Scott's grandfather. And they both came down after World War II, I think, and married girls from Forsyth and ended up staying in Forsyth. But Scott's family history, when I first heard his last name, Roadheaver, I traced him back to a family that was from Baltimore, Maryland, and I kept finding road heavers in Baltimore, Maryland. And what I had to do was I had to fill the gap in between these two. But the family in Baltimore, Maryland were also descendants of Lord Cecil Calvert. And it turns out later, as I was researching through the hours, I found the link to that person. So he's related to Lord Baltimore, who was Cecil Calvert. So what I was able to do was to trace from Patrick back through grandparents, back through other cousins' genealogies, and to take him back to Baron Baltimore, also to take him back to a man named Johannes, who was his many, many times great grandfather in Germany. So what I did was I took from Charles on Find Grave, and I was able to find his birth date and the information of his death accurately recorded, by month and date. And I Googled that along with his wife's name. And I was able to get to the next genealogy, which took me back a couple of generations. And before I knew it, I was all the way back to the early 1700s to Johannes Rothenhofer, whose brother, along with him, came from Germany in a little small village. And the Rothenhofers were actually, the boys became pioneers in Virginia, but the ancestor in Germany, and little family documents that I read about them, so they never heard from the boys again. So the family just branched out in America, and they retained an identity with each other for a little while. And then what it was that they were doing in Germany was they were weavers in a village. They were professional weavers. And when they came to America, they totally changed their profession, became pioneers and farmers. And, lots of famous road heavers are all over, the Southeast and up in Maryland, even to this day. And it's a very unusual name. They decided to change the name to Road Heaver to Americanize it because Rothenhofer probably was actually quite hard to spell and to understand. And they didn't want to maintain their non-American identities, so they wanted to blend in. So after I connected the dots, I took Johannes Hahn Rothenhofer, who was their first one of the brothers that he was related to, the one that he's descended from, and his wife's name, who was Maria Elisabetha Claudia, because I found that in another person's genealogy, and I Googled that, which takes me back further. And Googling that got me back to this page, which has the first ancestor in America in 1702 and where he's from, which is Biederbach, Germany. So I was able to actually look up Biederbach, Germany, and show that to Scott and show him where his ancestors were from. But actually, from this genealogy all the way back, I was able to cross-reference numerous times from his uncle all the way up to grandparents, great-grandparents, through the family trees to who they married. And I did that, like I said, in about 4 hours with Googling properly and going to different people's family trees. with documents, which is always good because a lot of people that are older than you will document, or that have spent more time on it, will actually have furnished documents and things too that substantiate who these people are. And here's a beautiful view of the village that his family came from before they became Americans. And here's where it's located in Germany, well, modern day Germany, because the boundaries of countries changed many, many, many times as empires took over the years. But yes, this is where Scott Roadheaver, originally Rothenhofer, his family came from this little village in Germany. And that's where their surname comes from. And I didn't trace it back any further because, I thought that was far enough.